Good morning, Lower Sixth. So we've started exploring recruitment selection and training. I've put the objectives of the unit up, the stuff that we need to understand, and we're going to contextualize this in this video around a recent article which was in the Times about an extra tax effectively on migrant workers and how it impacts the NHS. We're also going to look at the graduate recruitment process for Deloitte as well. So it's worth looking at how much money they've invested in their pre-employment checks before they actually do face-to-face interviews, because they're just inundated with thousands of people applying. Different style of recruitment process to the NHS, and also different to some of the smaller companies out there that won't have the money to invest in these types of recruitment processes. So here's some of the questions that have been asked so far, and it's interesting to see here that you need to know more than just recruitment, selection and training to be able to answer these. So if we think about this, we've got, this one's decentralised organisational structures that they put in there, but in some ways it could be that they're decentralising the recruitment, selection and training processes. This could be great for localised recruitment, especially if we're talking about international companies. This could be not very good for national standards, depending on who's doing the recruitment. And think about those diseconomies of scale, for example, where you've got lots of recruitment managers and lots of different areas. Maybe you don't need them all the time. If we think about here, we've got internal promotion to managers. So this is internal recruitment, and think about the links into motivational theory with how motivated the training assistants, the assistants to become managers of the future. They might be on a low pay to start off with, they get the development, they get the manager's job in the future. You've got esteem from Maslow, you've got lots of things there as well. However, this is internal recruitment again. We're going to be considering the alternatives of external recruitment. We might miss out on those brilliant people that weren't already working for us. Okay, so we're thinking about here, that's just a maths question, you can go and play with that one. This one obviously mentions the name of the title in there, so selection costs if they leave. Yeah, so the likely impact, so we're looking for the hook here on selection costs. Okay, so it's two different areas. Basically, people leaving, they're taking their talent with them. They've got to go out and recruit them all again, haven't they? Okay, so we can look at that as a 12 marker. So you're going to have however's for both of them, and it might be that people have been recruited in, and they've not successfully gone through the graduate recruitment training processes that Aldi's have. My understanding is they're quite intense, and Aldi's are a very demanding company, and quite rightly so. It might be that people are leaving because they're unhappy with the working conditions because they're underperforming. It could be that it's just generally the working conditions that are mentioned in the case study. There's a lot of negative points in that case study if you go through it. Staff training used for the Commonwealth Games. Well, this was obviously not a permanent position, and you've got training going up to the events, during the events. So there's lots of stuff that you could be talking here, but this could be more temporary workers. I believe in the case study that we had some volunteers that were being trained up. We've got some paid people as well. So you're thinking about motivation of the workers there. Two types of staff. Okay, so that's interesting. One type of staff might be the paid people. Another type of staff might be the volunteers in some ways. Okay, and then we've got the likely benefits of internal recruitment to Admiral. The downside is it ain't external. Quite easy to structure those questions. All of these we would answer obviously in context, and we would look for the aims and objectives of the organisation. Okay, all of them will acknowledge that it's really expensive to find new staff, it's expensive to train them, and not all staff are that brilliant and competent towards the beginnings of their careers. And if you then lose them after they're trained, not only do you have to replace them, you've got to go through that whole process of training them up, mentoring them, and even if they come in brilliant, they still need to learn the ways of the company. It takes a while for people to settle in and for productivity to kick in. Remember, we contextualise everything, including productivity. So, onto the NHS. So, anyone who knows any students that have applied to become doctors or nurses, there are the 6 C's of care in the NHS. These are sort of the aims and objectives. And if this was mentioned in a case study, you would obviously be thinking about how can you link that possibly into the recruitment, selection and training process. Okay, we've then got an equivalent from NHS Orkney, and they've just merged some of the 6 C's together with their core values. Okay, but this is what we would see for a medical application if any of you are going. So, if we think about it, so the recruitment process or selection process for the NHS, they are going to be looking for people that have the skills for these general 6 C's, and it might be that if you're bringing in experienced people, they've got other things as well, so they're qualified or experienced and competent, so they've got a track record if they're recruiting in experienced workers. That's quite important, clearly. If you're bringing in people to be medical students, well, there might be minimum requirements for A-level sciences, for example. You're going to have to do the UCAT. So, that will check lots of things about you. And if you score high, you've got a chance at an interview. And if you don't, they don't want you. And that's because they're so confident in the recruitment process. So it could be that screening could be online. Screening could be face-to-face. We could have competency-based interviews. We could just have a face-to-face one-to-one interview. It really depends on the individual. Look in the case study, it would normally tell you. Internal versus external. Obviously, our internal vacancies in the NHS are people that are already there. And there are benefits to staff retention, motivation, if you're training people to stay and get promoted. It's also a motivational factor for those new staff as well, because they'll see internal staff getting promoted, and therefore maybe they think they've got a lifelong career in the NHS. However, it might be that we have got skill shortages. We've got loads of vacancies in the UK NHS at the moment, and maybe there just aren't enough internal workers. Therefore, we look for external. Now, that could be external in the healthcare profession in the UK, maybe recruiting in from private hospitals. This could be external recruitment outside of the UK, and that is one of the areas that the NHS focuses on. And this article that you'll be reading in a bit actually looks at another barrier to external recruitment as an external from the UK because of extra taxation, effectively. Costs of recruitment, well, it depends on the process, so you have to think about everything that's described in the case study. From the initial advertising, but before that, you've got obviously scoping the job, identifying what the post is, coming up with the job descriptions. All of these cost money and time and need different skills from different people, be that a HR department, be that the departmental manager, and it goes through to finance, obviously, to do with, funnily enough, people want to get paid. So you have to think about the whole process. We'll talk about this more in depth in the classroom. Not enough time here to go through that in enough detail. Think about those induction costs, and it's really important. Even if you're going from one NHS trust to another, they will have slightly different versions of policies, procedures, processes. NHS is not standardised across the UK. You've got those healthcare trusts that will work independently, even though they will probably work together on a lot of things. And if any of you have tried to get one hospital to look at your health records from your GP, you'll understand how disjointed the NHS can be and how different people might need different levels of induction training. Okay, quite important, especially if we're doing external recruitment from outside of the UK, totally new to the UK. On the job training, literally doing training at work. This could be day release, this could be work shadowing. We'll talk about this more in class. And off the job training is just sending people away from the workplace. Now, if you are a degree apprenticeship nurse, for example, you'll be on the wards, you'll be working in whichever area you have been allocated to, and they will release you, sometimes in a block, maybe 1 week every month or something. It might be that you get day release once a week to go off to university to study. Okay, it really depends on the degree apprenticeship, for example. If you're doing constant professional development, which you will, speak to any doctor in the NHS and they will tell you how much training they've done throughout their career, then it really depends on the training. Okay, but remember, down the bottom, which I've left up from the start of this slide, it's just crucial, but we need to think about why is it crucial? Well, it's to do with these 6 C's and NHS targets. Okay, identify the aims and objectives of the organisation and make sure you contextualise everything in context with the hook. So quickly, have a quick go through Deloitte's graduate process to illustrate some of this, slightly different processes. Now remember, Deloitte will pay a very good salary straight out of university. They'll put you on a fast-track development scheme, and by the end of it you'll be earning significantly more. So if we think about that, there's going to be lots of people that want to do this. So the initial screening is quite important, and I've just clipped this off their website. And this really is minimum requirements. So do you fit the profile? Have you got the right qualifications? Have you got the right attitudes? And this could be a questionnaire. This could be a psychometric-based assessment, checking some of those skills. It could be problem solving, it could be team working. There's a growing amount of online video interviews, so they will give you some set questions. You'll record yourself and upload the video. Now, lots of companies are using AI to assess these videos now, and that could be from the tone, posture, through to the responses that are there as well. Some still use people to watch the videos. I very much doubt if Deloitte use a real person to assess your interview videos at the moment. One of the first companies out there to integrate AI into the interview process were some of the big banks and the consultancy firms, and there's lots of others out there as well. So psychometrics, if applicable, it says here on their website, and make sure you read the recruitment and selection information about each of the roles that you might be looking at. This is something you can sort of practice to be familiar with, but you can't game the system. So they've got fail-safes built into it. People have invested a lot of money in this type of process, which is why the big firms are so happy that it's in the earlier parts of their recruitment process. If it looks like you're trying to game the system, maybe you come across as dishonest, not the sort of characteristic we want in an employee, really. So the interview process is here, and it says, and it talks to you about a telephonic screening. Maybe use it over the telephone. So this is after the other stuff. They've called this the interview process, so if you were skimming through to this, you might miss the initial stuff that you need to get through first. There might be 2 to 3 stages. Some companies have got up to 5 before you even speak to a real person. Then you'll have a face-to-face, which is an assessment day. This is pretty much all day, and you'll be observed from the second you are, within 50 metres of the building, right the way through to when you leave. Break times, lunch. A lunch sort of is an interview, because you'll be having lunch with people that are interviewing you all day. So if you think they're not taking notes on you, then think again. And then it says right the way through. So the final stage could be a meeting with a partner or a director. Well, since Deloitte have only got 700 and something partners across the world, you can imagine how few will get through to this. Some of the stats I've seen about the start of this interview process is about 5% of people from the initial stages I mentioned get through to interview. It's a competitive world. Pre-employment checks, they'll just make sure that you are who you say you are, that you're eligible to work, you haven't got any unacceptable criminal records against you or things like that, followed by interview and psychometric process. They've mentioned it again, so if they've not checked it to start off with, it looks like they might after they think about offering you the position. From the stuff I've looked at online, most of these psychometrics are before you meet a real person because of the obvious cost benefits of using a computer to assess all the applications and probably automatically declining people that don't meet a certain threshold. Saves a lot of money, and if you're thinking about the costs of recruitment, well, the cost of investment in this type of system will be phenomenal. There will be millions and millions of pounds. But you imagine the long-term cost savings of not having people reading through tens of thousands of CVs. Okay, then it comes to the offer. Finally, we've got an offer. Someone calls you, hello, would you like a job? Or they'll send you a nice email that says, thanks but no thanks, which is a bit soul-destroying because you were in the top 5% in the UK. You've done really well to get this far. Now you need to pick yourself up and go and find another job. Then you'll get a written contract, which is the rules and regulations of what you need to do. And then once you've signed that, then you will be able to join. So onboarding is a term about joining a company. This will be your induction process. This will be initial staff training. You'll be buddied up with a mentor, for example. You'll be told where to report, what to do. You'll be also talked about, in your contract, it will talk about success measures and how you might progress and get through your initial trial period. In my job, for example, when I joined as a Dalmatian, clearly, I was given a permanent contract straight away, but I was given a 12-month probationary period. So that's a very long probationary period, but they would see me teach for an entire year. Actually, that's probably a lot more useful than saying I'm going to give you a 3-month trial period. Okay, and then at the end of that, I had a meeting with my line manager who said, congratulations, we're not going to fire you yet. Okay, so here's the question we're going to think about, and remember, we're aiming for level 4. Okay, we're not aiming for perfection, we're aiming for level 4. Must invest in that mouse. So, accurate and thorough knowledge and understanding. Start with the definitions contextualised, please, supported throughout by relevant and effective context. That means your conclusion, your justification, your mocks, and every paragraph point, and the howevers for this, because it's a 12 marker, need to be in context. That doesn't necessarily mean you need to quote the case study every single time, but it does need to be in context. It needs to be about this employer and not just employers and workers and costs. Contextualize it, okay? We're looking for logical chains of argument, and in this case it's a 12 marker. I think you should be aiming for 5, but remember, if you're struggling with 5 and you're struggling with time, just write it like a 10 marker. I think if you were to do really, really well and you nail everything in a 10-mark structure, you're going to get 9 or 10 marks. I think in the real exam, if you complete the rest of the paper, you'll be very happy with that. So don't over-perfect your answers. Stick to 1.2 minutes per mark, which is about 15 minutes for this one. We need balance. Well, if you're following roughly that structure, then you'll be fine. We're looking for those wide-ranging arguments. This is the difference between a 10 and a 12 marker. Wide-ranging, according to one of the chief examiners in an open interview, was more than 2. So as in a 10 marker could be 2p paragraphs, answer the question, justify, as long as it's balanced. Realistically, we're looking for more than 2. His words, not mine. Okay, so we need to, I think this structure for a 12 marker is more than 2, and if you justify it properly, there's another one, and your MOPS is probably another one, but that's definitely more than 2, isn't it? Okay, so we are looking for an awareness of competing arguments, which means your howevers need to be in context as well. However, don't come up with something random from the textbook, because it won't be contextualised and possibly it will be ignored. And the supported judgment is not just answering the question, but remember, we've been practicing judgments a lot, so think of the alternative possibly. Yeah, overall, the likely impact of this is positive or negative in context, because without, yeah, maybe. So first of all, we're going to plan the question. So we're talking about the hooks first. So our likely impact is clearly the start of our hook, but of what, on what? Of increased immigration health surcharges, okay? We know what the of. On the recruitment and selection process for nurses. This is not just the NHS, this is for nurses. So it's the likely impact on the recruitment and selection processes, so highlighting half of the question again, like a geography student. And that is the focus, okay? And it's not across the UK, it's within the NHS. So, first line here is, I'm going to pause, well, you're going to pause the video in a second. This is the first line of an article that I've borrowed from somewhere, and we can see that there's a big increase. Now, this article is definitely biased. It was written to be biased. I've not adapted this to be fit for purpose for an exam paper. Your challenge is to get counter arguments from this. So you're going to have to think. Okay, so we know what the hook is. It's likely impact of this 66% increase on the recruitment and selection. Two things there. For nurses in the NHS. Okay, we know the structure. We've talked through that. I'll put the article up for you. Pause the video. Did you pause the video? I don't think so. We've got some numerical stuff here from 2. Yeah, well, they've already done the percentage for us. And we've got some lovely quantitative information there that we could use. We'll move ahead. So, remember, our hook is likely impact, and it's on the recruitment selection processes for nurses within the NHS. So the increased surcharge will likely make the NHS a less attractive destination for potential international nursing recruits. Okay, now I advise that you start your answer off with a contextual definition, or you make sure that you're defining, in this case, we're looking for recruitment and selection. We've got a K in there. Okay, so we need to make sure that we're demonstrating an understanding of recruitment and selection. Now at the moment, this is started straight into a likely impact, which is fine, as long as it demonstrates in a bit some knowledge about recruitment and selection, or it's going to be one of those waffly answers that don't really answer the question. Here we've got the explain with application built into it. Now some of you write this separately, which is fine as long as you've got enough time, and some of you will write all of this in one big chunky paragraph. Let's just go through this. Now keep in mind, it needs to demonstrate an understanding of the key term, and it needs to be in context. I can already see quotation marks, which is lovely. I can see numerical information in here. I'm thinking it's in context. Let's see. Due to the high costs imposed by the surcharge, potential candidates, that's the language from recruitment and selection, may face, that is a chain of argument, but I haven't emboldened all of them for you, financial barriers that could deter them from applying. Okay, this is language from this. The burdensome increase quoted from the case study could mean that those with limited resources might no longer see the NHS as an achievable or desirable employer, especially if they have dependents from the case study, given that the total cost for a 5-year visa for a family can be as much as £18,110. Okay, so this is an impact, and the impact is they might be a less desirable employer. Okay, so we need to think about this from the hook perspective. Furthermore, the surge in upfront costs may also diminish the pool of talent that the NHS has to draw on. That's a direct impact on recruitment, as it puts additional strain on the financial aspect of moving countries to work, which is already significant. So the impact is we might have less people in the recruitment and selection process, and they might decide that they don't want to go to the NHS. They might just go to Germany, for example. However, it is possible that the quality of experienced healthcare workers, not just workers, but contextualised, could increase as those undeterred by the surcharge may be more committed or financially secure. Well, they're going to have to be more financially secure, aren't they? Because the costs are going up by 66%, potentially leading to a stable and less transient workforce. So this is an impact on the NHS recruitment, selection and training. They're more stable, as in they might stay, and they might not just come to the UK for a couple of years and then pop off to Germany. Okay, that's a direct impact on the recruitment and selection processes of healthcare workers. Now, at the moment, there is no mention of nurses, but we have got healthcare workers. So, for this to be even better, I would be replacing healthcare workers with nurses. Okay, so that is sort of in context, but it could be better by making it nurses. The increased surcharge may prompt the NHS to revise its recruitment strategy. Okay, so that is an impact on the process, to focus more on domestic or EU workers who are not subject to the surcharge. That's our point. It's a direct impact here. Okay? Given the elevated costs of hiring international nurses, loads of nurses in this one, where before we only had really one mention here, the NHS might adopt strategies that focus on internal recruitment and retention of current staff, internal versus external. By investing in current employees, the NHS could mitigate some of the recruitment challenges posed by the surcharge. We need to keep our staff more, look after them, maybe they don't leave, maybe we don't need to recruit so much. Furthermore, training and upskilling existing staff could enhance the quality of care linked to those 6 C's and operational efficiency within the service. Now, operational efficiency is definitely a little bit of an abstract term. It'd be nice if that was contextualised. Just let's see how it goes. As indicated by the case study, so you can see here that the student has been going through it, they've been talking about international nursing, which is great, and that's in context, and they've got towards here to impact on, obviously, the NHS recruitment process. They thought, hang on, is it contextualised enough? Let's make sure we're discussing the case study directly. Public sector employers rely on immigration systems to meet workforce requirements for the roles, and then we need a bit of an interpretation here, or we're just quoting something and it won't reach the level 4 criteria, suggesting. Sometimes I encourage my students to write things like this could be interpreted as, but suggesting is perfectly good, a possible over-reliance on international recruitment. Okay, so the impact up here is maybe they should focus more on internal recruitment than they currently do for external recruitment. However, this move to internal recruitment may not adequately fill the existing workforce gaps, because they're mentioned in the case study, especially in specialist areas where international recruitment is often necessary. If you don't have the surgeons, it takes years upon years to recruit these and train these internally, so you might just need to recruit people in from the available pool, which might be outside of the UK. Overall, let's answer the question. The increased immigration health surcharge will likely significantly impact the recruitment selection process for nurses within the NHS. Significantly impact is a bit waffly, but then they save themselves, making it more challenging and potentially less diverse. Okay, so impact of this on the recruitment and selection process within the NHS. The impact is more challenging, a bit abstract, but potentially less diverse is obvious because they're only using internal recruitment possibly, or not only, but more. Then we think about our justification, which is sort of thinking about the alternative here. Without this international talent, the NHS might struggle to maintain staffing levels required for high quality patient care. It brings it back to the aims and objectives of the company, in this case the NHS. Now, I haven't thought of MOPS for all the different MOPS factors here, but an example of a potential MOPS could be here. And we like to phrase these about the future. So if we're thinking about the current 66% increase in some of these costs for our workers that are coming into the UK, we're thinking about something the here and now and in the short term. That's our overall answer. So this is where our overall answer is. Our MOPS is more future orientated. Now remember, your exam papers are normally written at least a year in advance of you sitting them. So if you're keeping up to date with current affairs now, that might be, this is lower sixth video, that might be something that is seen in the exam papers. Keep up to date with current affairs. Your MOPS are actually in your upper sixth year. However, now in 2024, for example, we could be talking about this case study if there was something on other recruitment problems in the NHS. Okay, so you have to think about that we give you the power to see the future. The future is keep up to date with current affairs, instead of your MOPS being abstract waffle that don't get awarded any marks. If you can't think of a contextualised MOPS, just don't bother writing one. Save the minute or two and go on to the 20 marker. However, in the future, the NHS's objectives to provide comprehensive care may be compromised due to workforce shortages if they can't recruit enough UK workers. So this is saying it might be less diverse, it might be more challenging to recruit them, and this is basically saying keep an eye on it because this could become a real problem. And we've seen the UK government dilute immigration rules whenever the NHS get too short of staff, and it won't surprise me if they dilute this for certain areas of recruitment shortages in the NHS. Our waiting lists are ridiculous enough at the moment, and this policy could potentially make them worse. But I'm not a politician. However, is it level 4? And that's all you need to think. Is it level 4? Are you hitting something in here? Because if you get all of those 4 markers, paper 1, paper 2, or the 8 markers, if you can get those correct, they're easy. Okay, as long as you don't do revision. Make sure you keep to time, and then on all your essays, if you hit level 4, for example, in your 10, 12s and 20s, you're going to be in this. If you complete the paper, you're probably going to get yourself an A star. If you overcomplicate those really easy questions and don't leave yourself enough time for the 12 and 20 markers, you're going to end up leaving blank pages. And if you leave a 12 marker blank in a paper, you're losing 12% of your marks from one question. It breaks my heart every year when you see a blank page and you think, why have they done that? At least they could have done was throw down some bullet pointed answer. You're never going to get top marks with that, but at least you're going to get some. Never leave a question and pretend you're coming back to it, because you're probably not. And remember, if you do the questions in the order of the paper, the next question you might be able to use some of the stuff you've already used in a previous question. Not always, but sometimes, especially the quantitative stuff. Is it level 4? We're not aiming for perfection. Level 4, complete the paper. Hopefully that's useful. Happy days.